All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and after almost 3 years of waiting, Andor Season 2 has finally arrived. If you're new to the channel or you haven't seen any of my Andor reviews before, I think Andor Season 1 is the best, most consistent season of Star Wars television that we've ever gotten and maybe ever will get. We'll see what Season 2 has to say about that. Season 1 was so singular in its vision with beautiful writing, performances, music, themes, set design, action. It checked all of the boxes. By episode 3 or 4, Tony Gilroy had me in the palm of his hands, and I totally trusted him that he would deliver a great season of television, and he did that and so much more. The only reservations I had going into Season 2 was that it might feel a bit more disjointed than Season 1 because there would be these one-year time skips between the 3-episode arcs. But after seeing these first 3 episodes, I already see Tony planting the seeds to a bunch of different plot points that will be the connective tissue throughout this season. Now, I really enjoyed these first 3 episodes, and I'm so glad I didn't record right after watching them because it was so much to digest, and I really wanted to sit with my thoughts and let these scenes and these plot points marinate because in typical Andor fashion, the moments are great when you see them for the first time, but then you think about them and then you go back and watch them and they hit so much harder, and I feel like Season 2 is starting off with that same energy. As always, Tony Gilroy has solidified himself as a master of the build-up and payoff because every little scene, every big scene that happens over these first 3 episodes slowly ratchets up the tension, and all of our players are set. He moves his chess pieces into place, and then in episode 3, when the dominoes start falling, it is so tense, it's so dark, it's so tragic. And this ending in particular made me feel dirty. It made me feel empty. It was so effective in the bold choices that it made. And if this is any indication about what the future arcs will bring, I think we're in for a lot of heartache for this season. The biggest surprise for me was the tonal shift from Season 1. It's not a radical change, but there are a lot more comedic moments layered into these episodes, and there is some more moments of levity when compared to Season 1, which had few and far between lighthearted moments. And I don't know if Tony's doing that because he knows there's going to be even darker elements to this season compared to the first season, and he needs to balance it out, or if he simply wanted to have more distinctive differences between the 2 seasons and not follow the same formula. I don't know. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. Now, before I dive into the main character arcs of these first 3 episodes and some of the criticisms I actually have for this first arc, I do want to give a huge shout out to the production designers, the set builders, and the costume designers because this Chandrillan wedding sequence that happens over these first 3 episodes is jaw-dropping. The wardrobes are beautiful and varied. The Chandrillan design, from the wedding ceremony to the dance hall to the ornamentation around the dinners and the elegance and the pomp and the circumstance, all of it is so engrossing, and it makes you feel like this is a 1,000-year-old tradition. It really immerses you in the world, and it's not just in the Chandrillan part of this arc. I mean, across the board, it's all fantastic set design, but I have to give the shout out here because it's some of the best we've seen in Star Wars. It's fantastic. Shockingly, I do have 2 criticisms for these first 3 episodes. One involves Cassian's storyline and the rebel turf war that he gets caught up in, and the other is surrounding the very traumatic and horrendous scene with Bix and the Imperial officer. It's not the scene itself. I think the scene itself is warranted and is very baked into the world of Andor. I do, however, have one issue with one line of dialogue that is said during it, and I don't know what the reaction is online. I have not seen anything. I haven't watched any other creators make YouTube videos on this, so I don't know if there's any backlash for this, but I personally have a very strong stance on it, but we'll discuss that when we get there. First, I do want to talk about the main character. I want to talk about Cassian. Diego Luna, again, was nominated for a Golden Globe for the first season. I think a lot of people were maybe surprised by that, but I think Diego has one of the hardest jobs in this show because he has to have the most restrained and subtle performance, where as Luthen with Stellan Skarsgård or Mon Mothma, they're wearing a lot of their emotions on their sleeve, whereas Cassian, it's kind of boiling inside of him, and there's only those small moments where you see just a bit of emotion leak out, like when he finds out when Marv is dead, or when he's listening to Nemec's manifesto. All of that takes a lot of really particular character work, and I really enjoyed his performance, probably more than maybe some other people. And in season 2, I like the character shift that we see right away. He is confident, he's completely bought into the rebellion, and he's also able to inspire others in a much more gentle way, or at least he can morph his inspiration to others to the situation. When he was in Narkina 5 with Kino, he had to be straight up, he had to be brutally honest, he had to yell at Kino to really motivate him to break himself out. Whereas here in this opening scene, which I really love, we see this tech who is new to the Imperial regime. We think she's new. She seems green. And she's confessing to him over this operation that they're working on together, where she's like, I'm nervous. I'm not brave. I'm shaking right now. And he's like, the fact that you're doing this, you're already brave. And I forget what his line is specifically, but he says something along the lines of, this isn't a new you, this is just you finally discovering yourself. And I thought that was such a interesting and poignant line that, you know, you aren't stepping into a new life or you're not changing your life, you're just fully embracing who you are. And I think, again, that calls back to him in season 1 when he denied that rebellious part of himself, or at least that part of himself that wanted to focus his rebellious side into something more productive. And shout out to the actress in the scene. I think her and Diego have great chemistry right off the bat. I love the normalization of the Imperials and that this is just a job to them. You know, the other supervisor is walking by and she runs up to her and she's like, oh, he's cute. You know, oh, you flirting with the new pilot or whatever. And again, it's like that normalized evil where it's so bureaucratic and it's so just everyday life that it doesn't come across as evil, but they're all contributing to it. And yeah, I thought this first scene was just a fantastic intro to the season. And then we get some great action of him escaping with the TIE Interceptor, breaking out, using all the really cool gadgets and weapons. And the visuals, as always with Andor, were fantastic. And what happens next is where my first criticism lies for these first 3 episodes. And that is with this rebel turf war that Cassian gets wrapped up in. He lands at the drop-off point, and these rebels capture him, and they think he's an Imperial pilot. They killed the other pilot that Cassian was working with, who was supposed to take the TIE Interceptor to the next location. And they start squabbling among each other. They start fighting over food, and then they physically start shooting each other and get in a standoff. And while I think this is true to the world of Andor, and I think that there are these factions of rebels who don't agree, and they're very guerrilla, they're very low to the ground. They don't have an organization like Luthen or Saw, even though Saw is pretty out there. I personally just didn't get bought into this conflict, and it felt like they didn't know what to do with Cassian for these 3 episodes, so they had to delay him from getting back to the harvest planet that Bix and Brasso were on. So they came up with this idea, and I think the execution of it for me just didn't work that great compared to the other arcs that we saw to start the season here. I'm curious to hear what other people think of this, but this didn't really land that well for me. The main saving grace is that I know Tony Gilroy is always planting seeds for things that will pay off later, as I alluded to in the intro, and it is revealed by the end of this episode that the moon that they are on is Yavin 4, where the eventual rebel base will be in A New Hope. So this ragtag group of rebels that we meet in this first arc may come back around and there might be a satisfying payoff. But for now, at this moment, I didn't really get caught up in this part of the first arc, personally. Moving on to the Chandrilan wedding, Mon Mothma, my queen, returns in all of her sad queen glory. She was my favorite character from season 1 because her motivations, her passion to help people and make the galaxy a better place was in direct conflict with every part of her moral code, and it continued to ruin her already shaky family life at home. And the perfect tragic climax to her arc in the first season was that to continue funding the rebellion, she had to agree to an arranged marriage for her daughter with this criminal banker from Chandrila. We know that Mon Mothma is not happy in her marriage because it was arranged. She never wanted to put her daughter in the same situation, but she had to for the rebellion. And now we see her still wrestling with that decision throughout this 3-day ceremony. And I really liked the slow tension that was built up throughout these 3 days with her old friend Tay Colmer, who starts to become undone because as a result of helping Mon Mothma fund the rebellion quietly, some of his other investments started to go sour, and he was losing money because of what he was doing with Mon Mothma, and his true colors start to show. At the end of the day, he's a banker. He is greedy. He wants to make money. And even though he was affable in the first season, he was agreeable to everything Mon Mothma wanted to do, he was almost too perfect of a supporter and a friend to her. And to see that surprisingly turn and him slowly turn on her throughout these small little conversations that he has. His wife leaves him, he's drinking, he's getting drunk at all of the different ceremonies, he has to get carried home from one of them. And Mon just can't believe what she's seeing. And in typical Mon fashion, she tries her hardest to try and keep everything together, and she just can't. And it slowly starts falling apart, and eventually Luthen realizes that Tay is going to be a liability, and that he might reveal what is going on to recoup his money. He might not support the rebellion anymore, and to get his investments back, he's going to say, you know what, screw it, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to turn you guys in, and maybe if the rebellion falls away, my investments will get better. And Luthen ends up ordering a hit on Tay, and Mon Mothma is just so broken because, again, she loses something so dear to her in pursuit of making the galaxy a better place and trying to support the rebellion. Not only does she lose Tay Colmer, she loses her daughter fully because she tries to have this motherly moment with her in a couple of the scenes throughout these episodes. In one scene, she's crying because her new husband doesn't want to hold her hand. He's very standoffish, and Mon says, I'm sorry, but she's not saying sorry that she's not getting her hand held by her husband. She's saying sorry because she did this to her through no fault of her own, and she doesn't even realize what went into this marriage or why this marriage is happening. And then when she presents her, before she walks out and goes to the marriage ceremony, she's like trying to have a heart-to-heart. She's like, oh, my mother was drunk during this moment, so I'm here for you, and you know what? We don't even need to do this. I'm here for you. And her daughter just looks at her crazy and is just like, I wish you were drunk. And between that and Tay Colmer getting killed essentially by Luthen, she breaks. She completely breaks. She starts to take shots. She starts dancing. She starts letting go of all of this pent-up emotion inside of her, and she completely lets go. And I am so curious to see where this leads her character. Does she finally give up on trying to hold everything together? Does she finally just commit herself to the rebellion? Similar to Luthen, she makes her mind a sunless place. She shares her dreams with ghosts, and she completely just turns everything off and goes full-on rebellion. In the first scene from the first season that she's in, Luthen presents to her this artifact that is this goddess that has a sun head and a snake head. And in that moment, you could, of course, interpret it as Luthen, he's two-faced, and Mon Mothma, to a degree, has to be two-faced. But now we might see the ruthless side of her, or at least the side of her that could become the symbol of the rebellion. And I think that would be really interesting because she's gone through it all, and I think she's finally said, you know what, I can't control anything except the rebellion. I'm done. I'm just going to move forward. So I'd love to keep talking about Mon Mothma's arc and all of the little intricacies of this wedding sequence, but I'm just going to leave it at that, and I'm going to move forward to Bix, Brasso, and what's his name? Wilmon, the shopkeeper's son who threw the bomb at the Ferrix funeral for Marva. And they've been living and working on this farming planet, being mechanics for farming equipment and they're essentially hiding in plain sight because they're undocumented workers. If the Empire came through and did a sweep, they wouldn't have papers and they would get arrested, and then they would find out that they were involved in the Ferrex riot and uprising. This arc gave me a lot of Inglourious Bastards vibes. It felt like it called back to not only World War II and the hiding of the Jews, but also it felt very close to today, and it felt like Tony was making a statement about undocumented workers being taken advantage of and then pushed to the wayside when things get hot. And while this part of the arc is the brightest and most hopeful, we see a peaceful corner of the galaxy untouched by Imperial rule at the time, it does take the darkest turn in the series and in Star Wars of all time. And now I want to get into the very sensitive and horrific scene between Bix and the Imperial officer. I don't think I can say the word that is implied here, so I'm just going to dance around it. This Imperial officer is obviously eyeing Bix. He always comes to her when she's alone. He tries to get her to come with him to get drinks in a nearby town. And then he comes to her when she's alone in the trailer without Brasso or Wilmon. And what ensues is an attempted sexual assault on Bix. Something I really never thought I'd see in Star Wars. And my issue with the scene isn't the inclusion of it, because this is well within the confines of what the Empire would be doing at this point in the timeline. Andor as a show has been an exploration of power and what it does to people, and how the Empire has exploited the galaxy in every conceivable way. So an attempted sexual assault from a high-ranking officer on a civilian is not outside the realm of possibility. Where I take issue with this scene is where Bix has a line where she physically says, "He was trying to blank me." I don't think I could say the word for YouTube or for any streaming platform, so I'm just not going to say it. But her saying the R word, I think, has a huge impact on kids watching Andor or Star Wars in general. Andor is a mature show. There's no doubt about it. It's the most mature Star Wars show we've ever gotten. But I always fall back to George Lucas and his principles for Star Wars. Star Wars, at the end of the day, should be for kids. It should be for adolescents coming into their own. And I personally don't think that Star Wars should be the thing that introduces that word to a younger generation. It is a terrible, horrific reality of our world that every kid will eventually learn about, but I don't think Star Wars should be the thing to spur that conversation. I don't know how many families are watching Andor together. I know if I was at home, I'd be watching with my dad no matter what age I was. We would be watching the new Star Wars show together. Or if I was watching with my sister Jen and I was 10 or 12 years old and this scene happened and I heard that word for the first time, I think it would bring up a lot of uncomfortable conversations to be had among the family at that point. And that's not me denying the reality of it, and that's not me saying that it should never be talked about. I just don't think Star Wars should be the conduit to tell kids what that word is and what that act is. I thought the act itself, the implication of the act on screen, was enough to be effective. And I'm not trying to limit Tony Gilroy and his creative freedom. I think he had a point to make here. I think he wanted to fight to use that word, and I think there's a lot of passion and there's a lot of intention behind him including that word in here. I don't think he just threw that in here. However, I think restraint would have been better with this scene and with that word in particular. So that's my thoughts on this scene. I think the scene is extremely effective. It made me feel, like I said, very dirty to watch. It really ends this arc on such a low, dark moment that it really sticks with you. And I appreciate moments like this that make you feel that way. My only issue, like I said, is coming down to the word being included itself. Now, I know that took a very somber turn, and the arc ends with Cassian coming to save them, but they do lose Brasso, which was, again, very sad to see, because Brasso was such a underrated character from the first season, and seeing Cassian hold him and kiss his forehead and have to leave him on the planet is so brutal to watch. And I am curious to see if this theme of that sacrifice goes all the way through to Bix and Wilmon, and essentially all the main characters of this show will lose everything for the rebellion. So Luthen already has nothing. Mon has officially lost everything at this point, kind of. And now Andor, Cassian, is losing all of the people from Ferrix, and he might lose them all by the time we end this season. And I think that would kind of be poetic, tragic, all the words, and I think it would work. And I'm curious if that's the route they go. The last thing I want to talk about is Dedra, Director Krennic, and Cyril. Ben Mendelsohn returning as Krennic is awesome. I think they have a great opportunity to build his character up a lot more than what we saw in Rogue One. I enjoyed him in Rogue One. He was cunning, ambitious, but he was also somewhat childish because he started to unravel towards the end. But at the end of the day, he's a director. He's someone who does talk to the Emperor frequently. He is the architect of the Death Star. So I feel like he should be extremely imposing in this series, and I think there's a great opportunity for them to elevate his character. I really love the whole Gorman presentation, the ad about the Gormans and them spinning silk and the spiders and the propaganda officers being in there. Again, felt very Nazi Germany-esque, and is setting up for a big event to happen on Gorman where they need to mine these rare earth metals. Again, Tony Gilroy drawing from geopolitics of today, of countries being exploited for their rare earth metals and the populations of those countries being exploited. And again, the business-like cruelty of these officers eating hors d'oeuvres and just talking about, oh, how could we destroy an entire population? And just throwing ideas at the wall like it's a business conference. It's really just that quiet, casual evil. And we see that Dedra has kind of been demoted, and she is being assigned to this Gorman case to think about how they can subjugate the population to get to the rare earth metals. And there's so many great parts of this because, one, it shows that Dedra is so laser focused on finding Axis and Luthen from the first season that she literally gets demoted. Like, her ambition and her drive to protect the Empire has actually cost her, which is pretty interesting. And the fact that Krennic can kind of read her right away, again showing that Krennic is on just like a different level, whereas Dedra in the first season was very hard to read, and I think she comes off to other officers as very hard to read, but Director Krennic just sees right through her. So I'm very interested to see where she goes. I want to give a shout out to my favorite Imperial officer ever, General Partagas. I want to see more of him. I love this mentor relationship that he has with Dedra. It's such a great performance. I love the eyes. I love the eyebrows. And you like him, even though he's like a coach and mentor to her to be a fascist. Like, it's still endearing to see him care about her and want her to succeed. So I hope we keep seeing more of that. And then finally, we have to talk about Cyril and Dedra living together. I mean, the writing was on the wall in the first season. There was that tension between them. Cyril is just obsessed with her, and, you know, she's so intimidating that men probably don't typically go up to her, or she usually scares them away. So having someone be so infatuated with her, she's just like, yeah, I can mold this guy to be whoever I want, and I'll be the alpha of this relationship. And that's exactly what happens. It was such like a shock moment when she's at the apartment and Cyril walks in, and you're just like, no way, come on. And then the dinner scene between Cyril, his mom, and Dedra is actually one of my favorite scenes of these first 3 episodes. It's so funny without being tonally off from the rest of the show. And the moment where ISB Dedra comes out and puts Cyril's mom in her place was so fantastic. And we also got more backstory on Dedra and her upbringing, and we find out that her parents were criminals, which makes complete sense why she would be so gung-ho on bringing law and order, because her parents abandoned her because they were criminals, so now she wants to make sure there are no criminals. I'm curious to see where the relationship goes, and if Cyril just becomes a walking zombie and listens to everything Dedra says, or is his climax to his arc breaking free of these oppressive female figures that have been in his life, his mother always putting him down, and now Dedra being his boss in his life. So yeah, very interesting. I'm going to call the episode here because, 3 episodes, almost like an hour and a half of content. It was so much to digest and so much to talk about, but I have to make this somewhat palatable for you guys. So I hope you've enjoyed this analysis. Please let me know what you guys are thinking of Season 2 of Andor so far. Please leave a comment below for this YouTube video, or if you're listening to this on a streaming platform in podcast form, leave a comment on there or a rating. Click the notifications bell so you guys know when I'm posting new episodes. Please subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram at @star_wars_mark of balance. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the force be with you. Peace.